just so excited to welcome you to this webinar today and want to thank you for being with us. I know everyone has full days, and so we just thank you very much for making this a priority today. And I woke up so eager for this webinar today. I asked Meryl a few minutes ago, I said, can I introduce you? Because all this was just bubbling up inside me. And I don't think it was just specifically the topic of this webinar compared to other topics, but knowing that it is going to make such a difference in my learning to speak strong, that it'll be another significant step in that journey. And I think with it was just a deeper realization that learning to speak strong is such a journey. And how I see things now and how I hear things now are so different from when I first started working with Meryl. So even though in years past, 2 or 3 years ago, however long it's been, I was really committed to as clear communication as possible, I have learned so much from Meryl, from her books, from her webinars, from just working with her, seeing how she walks her talk with such integrity, that my communication world is changing so fast. And I just see how other people communicate in such different ways. So I know you will each come away with some type of nugget that's just perfect for where you are right now. And Meryl, I just want to thank you for all the ways that you encourage us and for the ways that you empower us on our Speak Strong journeys. So we're eager to hear what you have to share with us today, your insights and your perspective.
Wow. No, I didn't script that. I'm sure you can tell. Angela, thank you. And working with Angela has been an amazing experience as well. The kind of support she gives me goes far beyond the technical. It goes far beyond picking up the pieces or filling in the gaps or that kind of support. Angela has actually been very fundamental in shaping who I am and what I do. And I think in some ways we could just stop right now and this would be a useful experience, just to have heard you describe how we work together and how rewarding it is. I just thank you. I like that. I'm glad we got it. Thank you. So welcome to the 12 Administrative Assistant and Office Pro Roadblocks and Remedies, Essential Management Skills for Administrative Excellence. And this is a dual-purpose webinar. I put together a PowerPoint that had these particular points that was intended as a preview for online training that I'm doing starting in November. It's a 4-part online training that I'm doing starting in November. So I put it together and I thought, well, I've got all this together, might as well use this information and give a webinar so that people can not only get some tools and tips, but also get a sense of what we talk about. Now, I will tell you that this is a very different format. You know, we have about 60 people on, 60 people registered for this, and it's a different, and I have a lot of information to cover in a very short time. What we do in the online training and in the intensive programs is much more interactive. It's much more an exchange of best practices. One of the things that is very dear to me, one style I love working in, is a collaborative style where I have a good sense of what we need to talk about, what I want us to cover, and I draw out the information from other people. And the reason why that's so valuable is because when other people make a point that I was going for, they usually make it better. They make it from a very deep and current experience from a very powerful place. So today I'm going to be talking at you, and that is one great way to learn. And know that when we do the intensive, it has a very different format. So this is going to give you some quick tools. So let's move on to slide number 2. And I'm going to click and try again. There we go. Slide number 2. And my question for you is, are you bigger than people can see? That's a real challenge that can be a road mark for a lot of people. Now, a lot of us work for people who are much more in the limelight, the people who their work is more visible. And as assistants, administrative assistants' work sometimes it completes the whole and is less visible, but in fact, it can seem invisible because it's really bigger than what people can see. So while someone's got the magnifying glass and they're looking down, you're up flying over the whole thing, pulling everything together. The truth is sometimes people miss the importance of what you do, and they miss the importance of your role on the team. And I talk to admins who often feel small because of that, because they're not in the limelight, but also because what they do is bigger than most people can see. So the first thing I want to tell you in terms of action steps is recognize that for yourself. See yourself for as big as you are. Now, there are some times where you need to let people know, look, you're here looking at this great big event. I'm here figuring out how to make this happen without everything else falling apart. So that's the role that I play. So sometimes you need to let people know just what your role is. But for the most part, it's mainly important for us to know that ourselves. And I have an example from my own life in a different industry, in the speaking industry. I had many years when I was working for a seminar company, and I was traveling on conferences with some real superstars. And these women were fantastic. They were very skilled. They got attention. They got people laughing. They were stars. They're super outgoing, and I'm a bit of an introvert. Now, I would read the evaluations at the end of the day, and generally my name wasn't on the evaluations. But at the end of the year, the company was giving out awards for the scores, the total ratings of the conference as a whole, and I got the award. And for some people, they might go, well, wait a minute, your name wasn't on all the lists. Well, you know what? I made the whole thing work. I catalyzed a positive experience with the conferences. I was a good glue. So even though I may not have been the superstar day to day, my role in it resulted in an effective conference. And like that, assistants need to really own and claim where you are strong, what's important for you. The action step for this is just to define your role in terms of the whole. How do you complete the scene? And the other thing is to be very clear when you communicate what your part is, that you're not looking for reasons not to do things, that you're looking for ways how to make it work so things don't fall apart. So that's the first roadblock. Now slide 3 is your vision invisible. It's really hard to hit a target you can't see. And we often get so involved in our work that we forget, what are we doing this for? What is the bigger picture? Now, your performance reviews give you targets to strive for, but oftentimes they reflect an outer showing. It's more of a limited measure of what true administrative excellence is. I mean, it is really hard to reduce, and impossible actually, to reduce a whole year of putting your heart and soul into work without into a few measures and scores, numbers on a page. So that's why you need to know what excellence looks like for you. What does it mean? One of the things I always encourage admins to do is get a very clear picture of what excellence is for you in your life and in your role. Are you looking for perfection, or are you looking for excellence in some areas and no fatal flaws? Many of us beat ourselves up because we can't be perfect in all areas, but we can be very effective even if we aren't perfect. Are we looking to be all things to all people, or are we looking to be more defined things to defined people? What is your official job description, and what is your unofficial job description? What do you go into work every single day with an intent to do? How do you contribute in a way that may not show up on your job description? There's so much power. You can get inspiration and focus by defining a magnetic vision that will draw you forward to career success. Angela and I speak on this level very often, and it's important to both of us to pump up each other. And it's not an artificial pumping up. It's just a reminding each other, what are we doing this for? I've had it several times where I've worked on different projects with executive assistants, people at a very high level, and I could see they lost their spark. So it's like until we get that spark going, we're not going to be able to accomplish what we're capable of. We have to remember, what are we doing this for? What is it about? For me, my vision of a world where everyone says what they mean and mean what they say without being mean when they say it, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. I can tell you that truthfully. And I can also tell you that that is something that I really strive for, that kind of authenticity. And now I've taken it more to another level of just wanting to bring a sense of wholeness into the picture. Because in our culture, we're just so one-sided often, so get it done, get it done, get it done, and we lose the vision of the whole. And I'm very inspired by bringing that in, because I think without that, not only does everything fall apart, but we lose our spark. And then get others on board to help you achieve your vision. It's really something, you can see it when somebody has a very strong vision. And there was one woman named Holly who came to one of my admin trainings, and I asked in the beginning, who has goals for this? And, who came with a clear idea of what you wanted to get out of this? And there was one woman named Holly whose eyes just lit up, and she reached into her notebook and she pulled out her goals and she shared with us what she wanted to go back with. So she had an action plan. She had a vision and an action plan towards that vision. And I can assure you that every one of us got on board just by hearing that spark, that we wanted to help her leave with everything she came for. Now, one of the things that Angela was chatting with me about, Angela, remember you were talking about the lifestyle vision?
Yes.
Yeah, and that stuck with me. I really liked that, that part of our vision is, what do we want our life to look like? So it's not, part of the lack of wholeness is just an outer, looking at outer, I want to meet these numbers and accomplish X, Y, and Z. And part of our vision, both you and I, we've had this conversation, is that we want our days to look a certain way. We want a balance. We have a vision for how we operate that's balanced and more whole. Do you want to add anything to that, or does that make sense to you there?
No, that's great. I think you said it well.
So thank you. So I was looking, a friend of mine, used to be my hiking buddy, but not so much anymore because she's got an all-consuming new job. And we did go for a hike a little while ago, and I met her, at the end of the work day, and she said, well, I scarfed down some food because I didn't have no time to eat during the day. She works at home, but she works online. She mutes herself to go to the bathroom. And I went to their website, and they had job openings, but you had to be available from 7 to 7. And I'm going, 7 to 7, and they're even talking about having to mute yourself while you go to the bathroom. That does not work for me. So it's really knowing, what's in your heart, why are you doing it, but having a picture. And, it doesn't mean that you're going to dump everything and make it happen that way, but it's important that we know that we're moving closer to our vision of how we want to show up every day. So it's a true north. Your true north drives you forth. There really is a magnetic power in having that vision. The next roadblock, fires. Are you constantly putting out fires instead of focusing on bigger priorities? Now, I have some new experience with fire, as do you, Angela. And if there's anyone else here who's in the Colorado Springs area, you know what I'm talking about. We are very lucky that we are still in our home. The Waldo Canyon fire, we were evacuated 8 days, and Angela was not evacuated. She had evacuees at her home, so she was directly affected that way, but she actually had a better view of it from her home when Colorado Springs was burning. The fire was stopped short of this community. The original fire line is on the other side of our next-door neighbor's house. Fortunately for our community, the wind changed and they were able to create another fire line that's back a little bit of a ways, but boy did we learn a lot about firefighting. And so if you're constantly fighting fires, it's helpful to know what firefighters know. The goals of firefighting, one of the things about firefighters is they have very clear priorities. And Angela, did that strike you how often they were telling us what their priorities were in the briefings?
Yes, and they were very, very clear and very specific.
Yeah, very clear, very specific. They lived them, and it wasn't anything that they questioned. This is how we operate. Do you remember? I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you remember what the first one was? The first priority?
You know what? I don't.
Well, I will remind you. It's firefighter safety.
Oh, that's
the first
right.
Priority. Yeah, firefighter safety was the first priority.
Yeah.
So that had actually very important significance here in my community. We have a volunteer firefighting department, and there was one point where it was just too dangerous for them to keep fighting it. So they were pulled back. They had to go to the other side of the highway, and they stood there and watched it burn. And when it was over, when the wind shifted and they could go back in and fight again, they were shocked that the homes did not burn. But that just shows how important that priority is. And it's not just lip service, firefighter safety. And so for us as firefighters, in another sense, in a metaphorical sense, what does firefighter safety mean for us? Metaphorically, what does it mean? It's just like the example that everybody uses, when you're on an airplane and the oxygen mask falls down. Take care of yourself first and then the child. I hear from so many people who are just so tired, and they're so tired because they're putting out fires all the time, and then they reach a point where they get sick and they can't do anything more. Now, I'm not saying that we never push. I can certainly crank it out at times, and then I have to do some catch-up work later. But the main thing is take care of yourself, because you're no good to anyone else if you don't, and that means setting boundaries. I actually got an email today. Well, no, let me show you this. Let's see if I can switch it over and just show you this letter. Share my, I'm not really set up for that. Let's see. Okay, I'm getting there. Nope, I'm not. I wanted to show you a letter from someone who said one of her favorite things about the training camp was, that's not working. The one thing, favorite things about the training camp was the no fast, the yes fast rather, where you get in such a habit of saying yes all the time that sometimes you need to do something radical to break it. And so a yes fast means that you just decide you're not going to say, I did this, it took me 6 months. I mean, I am a recovering passive, so it took me 6 months to get to the point where I actually had choice when someone asked me for something. So I would never say yes. Even if it was something I knew I wanted to do, I would never say yes immediately. Now, I'm telling you, this is just a deep pause, a short pause. I'm not talking about something long, but just a short pause, and then I might say yes. But that broke the habit. So take care of yourself. Personal safety, firefighter safety is the first one. Then saving lives. And that's one of the reasons why they evacuate, because they don't want to have to, because but if there's nobody there in the area, they don't have to worry about that one. They can focus on the next one, which is saving property, and the next one is protecting the environment. So those are their priorities, and you need to know what your priorities are as well. And here's something really, really interesting to me. They know you don't put out every fire, but what you do is you hold the line. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, I'll tell you what that means in firefighter terms. In firefighter terms, they have a line where they're not letting the fire go past that. They mitigate around the area, and so they get rid of, they clear out a lot of things, and then that's where they hold, but they do let it burn to that far. So it's not that far from our house. It was amazing when we first came back. You look on one side, and everything's burned. The other side, everything is green. They held the line, and our homes were safe, but they sacrificed. Our trails got turned to toast. And sometimes we have to do that when we're firefighting. We have to figure out what the line is. So that's a metaphor, and I'm going to give you an example of how I think of that. What is the line? Just as something really simple and practical. You might have a target of how many emails that you will allow to be in your inbox each day, and I think that's a very good practice. We talk about all kinds of practices like that at training camp. So you might say, okay, 20 emails is the max. If I have, no matter what, I'm not going beyond 20. But then you have a fire, and so you've got something that you really need to put all your attention in. It could be some big conference that you're getting ready to have. And so then you might decide, okay, well, what's the line I'm going to hold now? And that line might be that you answer emails to your boss, you answer emails to your team. You have a pre-designed line that you follow, and you do hold that line. So that's an important thing to know in firefighting, that you are in putting out fires. Now, of course, another big role of firefighters is fire prevention. And the whole time you're fighting fires, you're thinking, okay, how did this start? And what can I do? So it's after action review. What can we do to keep this from happening? And how can we mitigate so the next time there's a fire, things go more smoothly? That's not what I was trying to do. Let's close that out and go down. Okay. There we go. So do your days seem mechanical? So much, there's a lot of things in our jobs that we don't have control over, a lot of things that are prescribed to us. Anybody in that job would be expected to do that the same way. It's procedural. And if you feel like you're a robot, well, there are some things you can do about it. I am not telling you that you don't need to follow standard operating procedures. In fact, what might surprise you is that I actually recommend that you create your own standard operating procedures. And the thing about that is that when you create them, there's a couple of things that helps you with. Number one is that it streamlines the things you do every day so that you have more time for creative things. And the other thing is while you are creating them, you become more conscious of the reasons of why you're doing things the way that you are, and you can also make little tweaks. And every little tweak you make in a process keeps it from being so mechanical. So the key here is, even if you're doing routine work, be present, stay there, and remind yourself why you're doing it. I was speaking at a Lean Executives Conference last September, and there was a wonderful fellow from a company that manufactures safety equipment. And their company is on fire with their vision. Safety is very personal to them. They actually have had employees who've been saved by their equipment, in serious car wrecks, and they have pictures. It's front and center. Every single thing they do is tied to the safety of the customer, and so therefore nothing is mechanical. And somebody had asked the question later on when I was speaking, how can you tie filling out a requisition or an invoice or a PO appropriately? How do you tie that into mission? And I turned the floor over to Tom Hartman, who was the speaker from the safety company, because I knew that they do that, that they know what they're doing it for, and that keeps it from being mechanical. So the action steps on this one is create your own standard operating procedures so that, if it's already spelled out, well, yeah, I'm not telling you to, just be creative and do it different. You need to be aligned with the rest of the team. But where is there wiggle room where you can improve it? And where is it undefined where you can define it? And that actually keeps it from being more mechanical. And here's another action step for you, another tip. Just stop, even for a moment between activities. Just that stop breaks the momentum and breaks the sense of being mechanical. It breaks the sense of just driving from one thing to the next. Now, for some of us, we might stop and think a prayer. So for others, we might stop and you do an affirmation. It all depends on what centers you. You could just stop just to stretch and yawn, but just something that's a break between different actions and activities. And then the other point I have in this area is that I have talked to so many different admins who have created their own jobs by seeing needs, genuine needs. I had one, this was when I was just starting out, and my assistant came to me and said, would you like me to redo your website? And I said, well, first of all, I didn't know I needed a new one. And secondly, I didn't know she had the skills. And she said, well, I could learn. And she did. She created that job for herself. Seeing a need, it's always, well, I'll tell you, my book, Power Phrases. You know how I did that? I saw a need. The company I was working for has selling a book called Life Scripts. And they said, we're looking for the next Life Scripts. And I said, I'll write it. And I wrote Power Phrases. And people would say, how did she get to do that? And, she didn't get to do it. She created it. That's how I got to do it. Another example, I have a friend who worked as a receptionist, and she was finding it kind of boring. And then she had a challenge. You know what? I am going to see if I can have a positive influence on everyone's day just in the 2 minutes that I talk to them. And that became her way of keeping from being mechanical. So that's number 5. All right, so then now we are on it's slide number 7, but point number 6. Does execuphobia undermine your effectiveness? We can't afford to have execuphobia. And, leadership can't afford for you to have it either. I know, I can tell you from me, again, recovering passive, I sometimes feel intimidated when I'm with people who are just very short and abrupt and get to the point, get it done. And yet I know that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve them. That's my challenge, and so that's the challenge that I choose to meet. No, it doesn't matter who it is. I'm still committed to saying what I mean and meaning what I say without being mean when I say it. I'm still very committed to saying what I think people need to hear to be successful, to be effective, to support them in our shared aspirations and our shared mission. So even if I'm afraid, and sometimes I can tell you that I do have that, it throws me off my center and I don't sound all that confident. But that's okay. I do it a whole lot better than I used to. I am not as scared of these types as I once was. It's much more rare for me to have that kind of fear, and that is partly because of my commitment is bigger than my fear. The other thing is learn. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think we have a blank screen now.
We do. You're right.
Black.
I see that, and I don't know why, because I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah.
All righty. How's that?
You don't want to miss anything.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay. And while we're checking in, do you have any comments or questions or anything that anybody's posting?
No, it's pretty silent right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I think everybody is soaking in your insights.
Well, I hope so. I have not actually invited specific input just yet, so I was planning on doing that after this point. So that's what I'll do. Okay, so the screen is up again?
Yes, great.
Thank
you.
I appreciate you letting me know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so part of it is just your own commitment. It's a commitment to your own professionalism. That's just an obstacle in your way, and an obstacle is not a barrier. It's something you need to deal with. And the other part of it is just really partnering with executives. And I really advocate a partnership model where we all have our different skills. We all have our own piece of the puzzle. And without the piece of admins, without the process piece, without understanding how processes work, leadership can just be out there, hanging out on a limb. So how do they think? That's important to know. And the other thing is, instead of being afraid of them, be afraid for them. And I give you an example. There's one person who attended one of my trainings who worked for someone who was just over the top in terms of being dismissive, kind of an elitist. She thought she was special because she was an executive, or at least her behavior indicated that. And it was so intense that there was a meeting of the team just down the hall from this executive's office. And this executive conferenced in. She was the only person who wasn't present. So I'll call her Terry. So Terry supports this person, and this person can be really kind of scary. And yet Terry's job is not to be afraid of her, and her job is not to react to her. Her job is to complement her. Her job is to free her to be able to use the skills that she has. Yes, sometimes she does need to tell her, look, this is how it looks to the team when you do this. So communicating that. But she also needs to know that the person she supports is that person. And so how can I fill in the gaps? How can I help mitigate the effect or the challenge that comes from what would be a near fatal flaw? So execuphobia, if we're afraid of them, chances then we're going to not be able to serve them. So how they think, they want to know this better be worth my time. They don't think they're being rude. They think they're being honest. They think there's no time for tact. And yet at the same time, they need people they can trust. They need to know that someone's got their back. They need people who can hit deadlines, and they need people who can make sure that there are no major problems. One of the things in the firefighting, I'll go back to that analogy, is getting rid of what they call ladder fuels. Ladder fuels burn to the top. They're things that what they do is they bring the fire higher, and so a healthy fire just is on the ground and it doesn't burn that hot. But if things burn up, and then the tops start to burn, the fire burns hotter. And, of course, the analogy for that is how can we get rid of or handle or manage what might be ladder fuels that would create problems at the executive level. So I am halfway through my points, and I want to stop for a minute, and I want to ask you if anybody wants to just put in a comment about what might be your biggest challenge. Or here's what I'd like. I didn't have a prepared question, so let me see. First of all, if there's anything anyone wants to say or hear comments on, that would be most excellent. But also, is there anything that I've said so far that really strikes a chord with you? If you would like to put that into chat, I would sure welcome it. So I'm not seeing anything on chat, so I'm going to just keep moving. And Angela, if you could keep an eye on that, I'd sure appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. So slide number 8, which is point number 7. Do the tasks no one else wants fall to you? It's not a very popular thing to say it's not my job. However, it can be a legitimate thing to say. It just depends on what you do and how you do it. The first thing is it's really important to know what your job is. And I find that, let me ask you now, here's a question. Here's a specific question. If you have a very clear understanding of what your job is, type in a 1. And if your job is kind of ambiguous, type in a 2. And if you have very little idea of what's actually expected, type in a 3. Okay. So we're definitely getting a mix. I actually am seeing more 1s. Oh, Angela. Angela's a 1. I'm definitely seeing more 1s than I normally do. Eleanor, hello! Than I normally do. And I'm happy to see that. Oftentimes people say they get extra points if they can guess what their job is. And I also sometimes see people take more of a passive attitude around that, as if it's not their job as if they don't have any kind of role or responsibility in that. And it's really up to all of us to make sure our job is defined. It's particularly clear or important if we have a set of standards that we are evaluated by at the end of the year, and that's different from what we're actually asked to do. It's very important that we have that. Someone in one of my seminars, a lady named Leslie, said that when her manager was out of town, that everybody considered her fair game. And what that meant was they thought, well, your manager's not here. You have nothing to do. You can do all this for me. And in fact, when her manager was out of town, she had more to do than other times. So for her, it was very important for her to get her job defined, so that that empowered her to be able to say to the other managers, I would love to help you out with that, and my manager has made it clear that this is my priority now. If you want me to make your thing a priority, you're going to have to talk to him. She found that that kind of clarity really made the difference. So anytime, instead of saying it's not my job, well, one big power phrase principle is, instead of talking about what you don't want or what things aren't, talk about what things are. And this is what my true priorities are. The coffee issue. Here's a really interesting thing. I find that oftentimes it's at a middle level that people find getting coffee is actually counterproductive to their effectiveness. And yet at the highest levels, often they work for somebody whose time is just so valuable that they don't even think twice about getting coffee. Well, you just need to know in your situation, does it take you away from your true priorities? Does it help the team? And it's all about getting it defined. So the action step is to clarify true priorities and log time on things, and is to clarify your true priorities. Now, I just got an email from a lady this morning who had attended one of my sessions, and she did a complete analysis of her job and situation. She did time logs, and she discovered that 65% of what she does could be done by an intern. I mean, that's huge, especially when you consider she also did another analysis that told her that based on a random sample of responding to emails, that it would take her 10 hours to respond to all the emails that she got in a single day. Now, responding to emails is only one part of her job. So that kind of analysis is really helpful. And what she also said, because one of the things we talked about at the conference was the importance of her to give her executive some very hard data, some very concrete information on the workflow. And so that gave her some power in the conversation. He was responding to that. So that is roadblock number 8, and it's slide number 9. So then the next one is, do you have responsibility without authority? It's kind of funny, actually. Sometimes people who rely just on authority can get less done than people who have responsibility without authority. It's nice to have both. There are 3 sources of power that admins have access to and use in different ways. One is personal, another is knowledge, and another is positional. Personal power is the relationships, and that is just a matter of how you relate to people, how much influence, do they want to help you out? Do they like taking your calls? When you just do little things like, I'm making labels, could you use some? Won't be a lot more challenge. Won't take a lot more for me to do that for you too. Then it's creating a sense of reciprocity. I know one manager who was so offensive and so alienating that I overheard a conversation, the assistant saying, well, he doesn't show us any respect. If he gets a fax, I don't want to give it to him. I mean, this is very small kind of behavior, but it does happen. People do want to help people and support people that they feel like are on the boat in the nest with them. The second type of power is knowledge power, and there are so many things that nobody else knows. I mean, the truth is now I highly recommend documenting what you do and developing standard operating procedures so that other people can do some things that now fall to you because you're the only one who knows them. That said, I also want you to value how important your knowledge makes you to your team. I have underestimated this with myself. I'm the author of 10 books. I've written phrase books. And I just kind of thought it was something everyone can do. And then I've worked with other people. I found out, guess what? It's not. It is a real skill. And you have real skills that I have no clues of. But the important thing is that you understand those and value it. And then there's positional power. And for admins, there's a positional power that I often see does not get tapped into. And that is the power that comes with the person that you support. So if you can speak with your manager's authority, you can be so much more effective. It's not an ego trip. It's getting things done. I mean, we have to be real clear, because I'm sure there are people who feel that I'm close to power, and so now that means I have power. Well, this is different than that. This is, I want to do the best job possible, and in order to do that, I need to carry my manager's authority. One woman named Leslie was the youngest person in the company, and she's awful cute. And, she was competent too, but people would miss that competence. And she had to, as she asked her manager to let people know. So he did. He said, look, when Leslie opens her mouth, my voice comes out. She then learned to say things like if someone didn't respond to a request, she would say, I am here on behalf of her manager. She sent me here to get this. Do you want me to tell my manager that you declined? So it's not a power trip, but it is a showing of power. And then one good power phrase principle is show your power before you use it. Don't bring down a hammer if you haven't shown your power. So responsibility without authority, my action step for this is to do an assessment. And the term power actually for me, like even power phrases, is a little stronger than my nature. It's influence phrases, but that doesn't have the alliteration. Speak strong, same thing. It's about using true power, which is power that aligns with other people and is aimed at achieving your shared aspirations. So the next slide is this ever you. I love this. I am not a doormat. I will not be a doormat. I will not be a doormat. I will not be a doormat. Oh, just walk all over me. Now, again, as a recovering passive, I used to feel like a doormat. I do not feel that way anywhere in my life at all anymore. I'm very happy to say, yay! And I hope you can say that as well. And, a lot of it really was about me. We teach people how to treat us. And I just developed a radar that says, you know what, this is not the way that I want to be treated, and going about up-leveling in a more in a positive way. It's funny, even just saying I am not a doormat introduces the possibility that you might be. That we don't hear the negation oftentimes. So instead of saying I'm not a doormat, what are you? Well, I say you're a professional, and you can expect to be treated as one. And I'll tell you one phrase, if you are still using it, please, please, please lose it. And I just caught a typo. You're not just an admin. You're not just don't say you're not. Don't say you're just an admin. Whatever your title is, that's what you are. But just an admin, there's no just to it. Admins are powerful professionals. Does multitasking leave you fragmented? One of the things that I've discovered and that we're going to be talking about in more depth in the training is personal Kanban, and there's a book called Personal Kanban. It's a little book. You will like that. You can also, if you go to personalkanban.com, there's a free software that can kind of show you how personal Kanban works. Kanban is a Japanese term that means signal. And in lean manufacturing, Kanban signals that it's time to manufacture something. It's time to make a product. And the initial Kanban is an order. The initial signal is someone places an order, and that triggers a whole upstream series of activities to fill that order. Well, it's also used in inventory management so that there are signals that are sent off when it's time to order things. So the personal Kanban system applies this to managing your time and managing your day. And so the very simplified version, which will be a good start for you, is to know that first of all, let me just ask you a question. WIP, that stands for work in progress. How many projects do you have open that you're actively working on at one time, at any given moment? How many projects do you have that you're working on? I'd like you to type in a number. Okay. Well, I have to say, the numbers aren't quite as scary as I had imagined, although some of them are. What Lean has found is that less is really more, and that you really do get the most done. Drum roll, please. The maximum effectiveness is when you only have 3 work in progress, 3 things that you're working on at one time. So what that means is it's going from multitasking to serial tasking, and then sometimes you will need to wait on something and then start on another. But the productivity is based on taking things from start to finish. And just an example of this is the handle it once rule with paperwork, which I've been teaching for 20 years now, which is the ideal. I'm not saying it can always happen this way, but the ideal is you make a decision on every piece of paper when you touch it, so you handle it once. Please tell my manager. Well, that's a whole other seminar, but we do talk about that. So if you I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. So if you touch a piece of paper, then you make a decision on it. You know, you might do it, you might delegate it, you might drop it, trash it, you might schedule it is another thing that you can do. But a lot of time gets wasted because we take something, we just do a little bit with it, and then we move to something else and do a little bit with that and move to something else. So it's not a perfect world, and you're not going to be able to work this way, but to have this in mind where you work on one thing and you take it as close to completion as you can before you pick up something else, and then never have more than 3 things in your WIP line. So the way that the personal Kanban system works is that every task that you have goes into your waiting pool, and then when you're down to 2, you can pull from one of those, and then you always then put it in a completed thing so you can see how much work you have done. So that's a very simplified version. I'll tell you, I got very interested in this because I used to be a total slob. And now I'm just a little messy on occasion. But my house is a wreck. I was buried under all my stuff. And I got a book called The Sidetracked Home Executive Handbook. And what she had you do is put all of your tasks on cards. And white cards were for the daily tasks, blue cards were for the weekly, and yellow were for the monthly. And then you file them for when you were going to do them next. So every day I'd pull out my card box and I'd pull out what was at the front, and that would be my Kanban. That would be my signal, okay, it's time to do this. And my house totally transformed. It was amazing. It's like I couldn't believe it was my house. So this is a system that's actually quite similar to that. The way that it's taught in the Personal Kanban book is to use sticky notes on a big whiteboard. You can also do it on online systems. I actually am thinking about freeing up a wall so that I can do it that way because I'm very kinesthetic, and I find that very helpful. So just as an action step or a tip, I want you to just to think in these, first of all, to think in terms of seeing if you can just, it's not that you're not doing these things, these other things. It's just that they're parked, and you're only focusing on 3 or fewer things at a time and taking them to completion. Angela, you agree. And Sherry says it is an awesome book. And Eleanor, OneNote is awesome. You know what? I don't know, did you discover that on the training too? Because Deborah was telling us about OneNote. And I actually use OneNote that way too. Do you use it that way? I've created a personal Kanban system out of OneNote where I have my tasks, and I have a note that's for that day, and I pull the tasks I'm working on into that. So thank you so much for posting that. Okay, the next step is mistake proofing. It's that old saying, is there never time to do it right the first time, but that there's never time to do it right the first time, but there's always time to do it over. So much of our time, it's like stunning how much of our time is do-overs. And I invite you to keep track of how much time you spend on do-overs. And again, when you talk about talking to your manager, when you do talk to your manager, whether it's about mistake proofing or about taking time to do it right the first time, or it's about personal Kanban, it's very helpful if you can cite, and be very specific and concrete and use data to explain the difference. Maybe you can experiment with working different ways and compare them and that kind of thing. But the data on how much time do-overs take is just amazing. So when you are correcting an error, is always helpful to have one eye on correcting the error and the other eye on keeping it from happening again. What can I do to keep this from happening again? One of my favorite mistake-proofing tools is Attachment Checker. You know how often it happens that you say, I'm attaching such and such, and there's no attachment there. Well, Attachment Checker is just a little software app that if you send something that has attach in there, it'll ask you if you meant to put an attachment on there if you did not include an attachment. That's an example of mistake proofing. But other examples are, for example, creating systems that make things happen more automatically. Like there was one lady who had a file system that she had to teach people how to use in order to be sure that the tasks that were assigned to her were prioritized. And she set boundaries. She refused to work on anything that hadn't been properly filed and logged in according to her system. And it was a mistake-proofing thing because it kept her from working on the wrong things. It kept her working on the right things. Another term is the obvious office. How can you make it obvious where people should leave things for you? Make it obvious how so that people don't have to ask you which paperwork they need for something. One woman totally streamlined her job by there were forms that she was handing out, and she created a very simple, obvious way for people to get the forms on their own. And I'm combining two things here: mistake proofing because that was obvious, but also just the visual aspect. The next thing is on the run. Do you have to update your boss on the run? I mean, some people updating is to walk really fast. I've had one assistant tell me that it totally changed her life when she started pre-calling the quick updates. I have 3 points and I need 2 minutes of your time. Very specific about that. And you know what she did? She said when 2 minutes was up, she stopped. She didn't care. She stopped. So getting right to the point. Start with a situation. Here's the impact. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what I need from you. Here's how we can move this forward. So being prepared. Another woman told me that her boss would always multitask when she was talking to him, and she realized what it was because she wasn't getting to the point. So she made an agreement with him. I will be as quick as I can be. I will come in prepared. I will cut out all the fluff and tell you what you need to know. And what I ask from you is your full attention. And he was happy to give it to her because he liked working that way so much better. So other times, if you need your manager's attention to get your job done well, ask for it. If you can give me a half hour of your undivided attention, I will be able to work more efficiently and not have to interrupt you as much during the day. This is one that I got from one of my seminar attendees who found that that, again, speaks in the manager's interests and was very effective. So this final point is, does clutter complicate your day? Lean manufacturing has a thing called the 5 S's. Sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain your office daily, whether you work in a lean organization or not. And Angela, we've had a lot of fun with this one, haven't we?
We have.
it's just so fun when we get on this, just saying, okay, well, tell me. I mean, it's little things like I moved my stapler where I could reach it. And actually, I mentioned that I got an email from someone who attended one of my trainings today, and that was one of the things that she had done, that she had taken the things she used every day and left them in the drawer, but the things that she didn't use regularly, she moved out of the way and just got rid of the clutter. Straighten means that things are in terms of the flow. This is lean manufacturing, of course, it's manufacturing, so it's like in a cell when you're assembling things, what's the proper order? But the fact is, in an office, we have the same kind of thing. It's like how it's work that makes sense. Shine means straighten things up. It means I have things working properly. Man, I got a new computer and it changed my life. It was just so nice, because it didn't have the challenges that my old one did. Standardize. My power phrases are kind of a standardization, and sometimes I think we're afraid if we standardize, it takes all the creativity and fun out of life. And actually, like my power phrases are there to make sure that you have that the important things are included in your conversations. They're meant to jumpstart. They're not meant to control you. And sustain, which means you practice this daily. Angela and she does some work for a fellow named Paul Akers, and he's a colleague of mine who runs a company called FastCap. And it's a design, they do wood and marketing company. They have woodworking tools. Every single morning, nobody is allowed to do any production, any work for the first hour. They actually spend the first hour every single day, everybody there, sorting, straightening, shining, standardizing, and sustaining your office daily. And it's just an amazing thing to see. And everybody there is so on board. And they've been doing it so long that their productivity, they just have such a strong foundation for productivity. And Angela, I'm going to put you on the spot again, but you are very welcome to decline if you want to. What would you like to tell us about 2-second improvements?
Oh, it's a book that is written by Paul Akers, and he takes a lot of these concepts that Meryl's talking about as they're applied in the manufacturing world. And even though he's talking about them and relating them to that world, as I read that book, I found that they translated very easily and practically to my everyday world.
Yeah.
So even though I'd never heard of lean manufacturing before I started working on that book, it just opened up a new paradigm, and it was like, wow, I can do that.
And it is a paradigm. And, you and I would sometimes say, let me tell you about my 2-second improvement. I put the lotion in my drawer so that I don't have to go into the other room to go get it. It's little things like that. And the point of the 2-second improvement is that if you do something every single day that saves you 2 seconds, then over the course of a year, that's a lot of time that gets saved. So it's a style of thinking, and we have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you answered yes to any of these questions that I have, I do invite you to join us for the Executive Administrative Professional Online Training Camp. In the past, I have just done this on site. This is my first online experience with it, and it'll be far more interactive than this, I assure you. We will be relating, and I will be deferring to the experts, because you really are the experts. And I have found so many times that no matter what my experience is, no matter how much I've studied a topic, that the gems that come from people in my groups just are so useful, so relevant, so helpful, so real life. So that is something that I would certainly encourage you to join me on. And also, there's some resources that can help you. And these are the ones that are more specifically designed for you. So I absolutely want to thank you for joining me here today, joining us here today. And then let's see, I think I have to find where I have the mute so that I can unmute you. But I invite you to, it's *5. So I invite you to ask questions, and I will type in questions or any comments too. And this one is one question I always like to ask at the end of any kind of conference. What is one thing you're going to do differently as a result of having been here today? And I'm going to ask you if you would type that in, and then when I unmute you, if any, and we can have that discussion too. This won't just help us. It's not just for me, but all of us. There's something very powerful about explaining what you got out of a joint experience, something that we experienced together that you plan to do differently. So anybody willing to say, what are you going to do? Sherry, 2-second improvements. Deb, the Kanban system for tasks. I would so love to hear how you do that and how that's working for you. Oh, yay, Marilyn, you're not going to call yourself just an admin. Love it. One thing you're going to do differently as a result of having been here today.
You are now unmuted.
Okay, so one note. And now we see I unmuted the participants, and you can see why I used mute. Does anybody want to make a comment? I might have to mute you back again. You can. Why not? Okay. Any comments here? Okay. I'm going to do this again.
You are now muted.
Okay, so one note, Terry, I would love to hear how you use it, because I have found it. I learned how to use it technically for a long time, and then when I found purposes for it, and it was all because someone who was using it showed us how she used it. That's when the magic of it came out. The 5 S's: yes, yes, yes. Saying no, so powerful. So powerful, the power of saying no. You can't really say yes unless you say no. Eleanor, Paul, I would love to talk about Paul's book with you once you get it. Karen, again, saying no. I'm with you there. You can say, yes is the big word, but you got to say no in order to be able to do that. Anything else? Oh, Terry. Okay, here's a question. It's not really a question, and I believe, Terry, you're applying to how to use the word no. And first thing is just to not say it habitually. For me, that was I had a no habit. I had a yes habit. So just overcoming the habit of saying yes. And then the second step in that process for me is just deciding, okay, what do I want to do here? Because a lot of times when we get a request, we think we have to take it just as it's given, and there might be some other way that we might want to do it. So here's an example of someone who said no, and she sent this in to me as a success story. It was fabulous. Her manager was telling her about some big project he had volunteered her department for. And he said, I'll expect you to handle this with the same efficiency and effectiveness you've done everything else. And she, instead of just saying no, she said, well, what can I take off of my to-do list to allow that to happen? And it was so funny. She said he was silent for about a minute, just dumbstruck. In fact, there was a clock behind his head that she watched while he was in silence. And it was so tempting for her to fill it in, but she didn't. And so he said, well, nothing. And then she said, well, in order to give this the attention it deserves, I need something else taken off my to-do list. And she said they spent the next 15 minutes figuring out how to redistribute her work so she could do a great job on it. So she said no, in a way, but she didn't use the word. Okay, well, thank you so much for your sharing. And
Meryl?
Yes.
Oh, just before you end, Terry sent a little note saying that the thing that she was thinking about was OneNote.
I see. Got it.
But what you just shared was excellent, and I think it was important for that to get in.
Yeah, good. All right. So it was a happy misunderstanding there.
Yes.
Yeah,
any comments on OneNote?
Well, I will tell you how I use it. Here's what Deborah said when she introduced it to us. again, I had been trained in how to use it technically, but in terms of how she used it, she said it's just like a spiral notebook, only it's online, where you create sections. And so I use it for planning, and I also use it, I have for journaling. I have a journal section that I use there. I keep my personal information in another notebook. So those are the main ways that I use it, and I'm still playing with it. But I find it a very, very useful tool because it keeps things in a format just like a notebook, only it's like a notebook where you can move things around and erase them. So, yay. All right. So I'm very happy you joined me. And I would like to share this with other assistants in the office. When is the next webinar? This is the only one that I have scheduled right now in terms of a free webinar. I will be posting the replay, and the conference that it is, that the online training starts, let's see, November 13th. So yes, Erica, it will be available, and it will be available at, you go to speakstrong.com /webinars. Jeannie, I love the word fantastic. Thank you so much for saying that. I would love to hear more specifically what was of value to you. The real joy in all this is hearing how you use this. I mentioned that today I got an email from one of the assistants. This is a lady who, you'd know the company that she works for. Recently I went on a hike, and this person the company was wearing both a hat and a shirt that had this company's logo on it. She's just crazy, crazy busy, and I hadn't heard much from her. It was so thrilling to me today that she not only contacted me, but she told me specifically what she was doing since then, and I would love to hear that from all of you. So again, I thank you so much for joining me. I love you as a group. I just do. You're some of my favorites. And I hope that I will see some or even all of you at the Executive Admin Training Camp in November. Thanks so much.